Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the part two of Breaking Boundaries. Brothers, I asked a question before the break. I'd like to go back to that one. We ran out of time, but it was regarding the aspect or the mentality of some Muslims who say, you're speaking about statistics, you're speaking about university studies and different things and, petitioning governments and, our local MPs and things of this nature to try and challenge anti-Muslim rhetoric in the mainstream and in the media and, coming from certain political figures. But you seem to be moving away from Islam because we have Quran and we have the Hadith of the Imam, or we have Quran and Sunnah according to the other schools of thought of Islam, but whichever school, we're moving away from the religious books. And you're moving into the area of like your akhl and things like this. Are we going on the wrong road, or how do you justify or qualify this argument?
Well, firstly, the Quran very clearly supports reason as a tool for living your life. The intellect plays a huge part in working out what is right and wrong. To be a robot that just doesn't use your own intellect or your faculty of reason would be inhuman. I think would be uncivilized, borderline. And I think that the Prophet Muhammad and the Holy Quran all the way through demonstrate your very belief is based on reason. It's not a Christian approach to faith, i.e. it's a leap of faith that you believe in something you don't really have any logical, rational argument for. You believe because you know the signs of Allah. And the Quran says time and time again, you see me you see me through the signs. Do you not reason? Do you not ponder? Do you not think? Tafakkur. These things are all to do with the faculty of reason. So firstly, people who argue from the Islamic angle, to what they're doing is they're actually trying to control you. What they're trying to do is make sure that you're a robot Muslim. You follow what they say, and they don't want you to be free thinking in your own intellectual discernment of Islam. So firstly, I reject that totally, that approach. Okay. Secondly, you've got this idea that Islam is in some way separate from life then, because Islam is a deen, it's a way of life. You have to apply all that is in the Quran and the principles of the Quran in your daily life. Time changes. No generation is the same, and every generation has to be treated. Environments change, places change, populations, attitudes change. What doesn't change is the principle of the virtue ethics within the Holy Quran. The principles of generosity, love, kindness, hospitality, caring, sharing, those virtues. I think what we've tried to do often within the formal religious institutional mechanisms, we've tried to protect Muslims who are religiously illiterate from malpracticing or going completely outside of that virtue ethics. And we've done it through a code of conduct, which we call the Sharia. We do it through regulations which are generally put in place to help prevent people. And we also turn to the clergy and the ulama, which is a good thing because there are knowledgeable people out there who may be able to help you understand better what your religion is. But the trouble is we become so lazy, we're so religiously literate, we become so lacking in critical inquiry and reasoning skills that we can fall prey to people who call themselves religious scholars, but actually are charlatans. ISIS is a classic example. They use the books, those same Quran, the same literature, the same hadith, as say the ulama of Qum or the ulama of Al-Azhar. What's the difference between al-Baghdadi and those other ulama? They're using the same sources. But for some reason, one is coming up. Now, if I blindly followed Baghdadi and the ISIS variety, I would clearly become quite a violent, nasty character who would basically would not accept or tolerate other people around me as a human being. Now, why is it that the other scholars who teach you tolerance and love and kindness, why have they come to a different conclusion? What I'm saying is that if I didn't have the faculty of reason, how would I be able to discern truth from falsehood? And utilizing the Quran and utilizing the objectives of the Quran, which are fundamentally to make what the Prophet said, excellence in morality and excellence in ethics as your goal, as your human civilization. He said, that's what I've come to. I've come to give you two things, excellence in morality, excellence in ethics. He wasn't, and therefore all your rituals and your practice are designed to lead you to that objective. Salah is not the objective in itself. Zakah is not the objective in itself. The actual destination, Hajj is not the destination. It's what that does to you as a human being and where it takes you. Unfortunately, we've got into this remote control style of what I call thawab orientated religion. And we want this sawab card which says, like, if I do this and I do that, I get that. It's a transactional religion.
Trading.
And so, in the context of Islamophobia, I think this is exactly why we would find it very hard to understand a concept like Islamophobia, because we're now in an environment where we've never necessarily faced this before. And we're having to deal with something which is in the real world. And if you start